Republicans know perfectly well that undocumented immigrants are already prohibited, as I said, from getting insurance on ACA, Medicare, or Medicaid. They know perfectly well not a single sentence or clause or comma that we're pushing in our bill does that. But they're lying because they know they're screwed if this debate turns into one about health care. And guess what? That's just what we are doing. We are making this debate a debate on health care.
All right. Democrats counterfeit resolution asking for $1.5 trillion. Here's how it breaks down. They're misleading the public about where the money's going to go and what it's going to. So you could see this little phony invoice. And here's what it outlines. Restore taxpayer funded for free health care for illegal aliens. Props up liberal news programs like NPR. Prioritizes electric vehicle access to HOV lanes regardless of vehicle occupancy. Removes work requirements for able-bodied, non-working adults on taxpayer-funded health programs. Resumes DEI projects. Hands criminals over $1 billion in funds for defense. It repeals the $50 billion in rural health care funded, hurting hospitals and children's in vulnerable communities. Reverses lawful executive action made by the president. Rescinds border security measures passed through the working family tax cuts. Usurps the president's authority over emergency funds. Locks in Biden administration grant policies in direct contrast to the president's executive orders. Handcuffs the Trump administration's ability to make agile decisions. Burdens Trump administration officials with added bureaucracy meant to slow down the progress, and increases $1.5 trillion in new spending just for the month for keeping the government open extended. Now, this also is part of their own kryptonite when they bitched about Trump wanting to increase the budget by $3.3 trillion. So they're okay with putting another $1.5 trillion on top of that. I kind of find that awkward.
Will more moderate Republicans that are frustrated with this situation, can they do anything about it? Will they?
Yeah, it's interesting. Kevin Cramer's from North Dakota is a pretty far-right Republican. I would call him a moderate. So if he is saying, whoa, we might want to step on the brakes here, I think that's a sign that they can see that there's a real risk. And look, Susan was talking about how there's one thing that's new here with Trump as we've been through a lot of these shutdowns. And another element of what's new is that in the past, you showed Newt Gingrich, right? People arguing for shutdowns. Republicans were arguing for shutdowns. They're like, this spending is bad. It'd be better for us to balance the budget. It'd be better for everybody. You have Democrats right now saying we need to have this fight because people want to have healthcare premiums. The message coming out of the White House is basically, we know people are going to suffer, and we want to try to make it the Democrats' fault, and we want to take over more power. And they've said that blatantly. I think that is not, usually in these fights, everybody's trying to point fingers at the other side and try to argue that their policies will actually help people. That's not even the administration's stance here. The administration stance is, we're going to cut these jobs. It's going to hurt people. We think it's going to hurt our enemies. So that's a bet we're willing to take. And we'll see if the Democrats ever cry uncle.
Senators shut down the government for 3 days after refusing to back a funding bill without support for the so-called Dreamers. The two sides are now negotiating a deal that could give those immigrants a pathway to citizenship.
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and they're Democrats. They're going to be Democrats. As you know, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration, health care for everybody that comes into the country, and that's what they're insisting. And obviously I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody. And so we're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down. But a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. We can get rid of a lot of things that we didn't want, and they'd be Democrat things, but they want open borders. They want men playing in women's sports. They want transgender for everybody. They never stop, and they don't learn. We won an election in a landslide. They just don't learn. So we have no choice. I have to do that for the country. Yes.
Let's agree for the sake of the next conversation that Donald Trump uses the most colorful language of any president, at least in the modern era, and says some of the most questionable things. And that is where our next guest comes in. John McWhorter is a linguist. He has a PhD in the field. He teaches at Columbia, and he has written extensively, and he too is colorful when talking about Donald Trump and specifically how this president talks. That's why we talked about it with John McWhorter.
Oh, this Columbia University. Yeah.
Columbia University is now closing the book on a series of high-profile disciplinary cases stemming from last year's campus protests.
The university announced final sanctions connected to the alumni weekend encampment and also the disruption inside Butler Library this past May. Sources tell CBS News New York more than 70 individuals were disciplined. School officials say the investigations led to penalties ranging from suspension to expulsion as they work to strengthen and streamline their disciplinary process.
Unmask. What are you afraid of?
Free Palestine!
Columbia University says this demonstration at Butler Library in May affected hundreds of students attempting to study. A source from the university telling us 80% of the participants are being suspended for a minimum of 2 years or expelled.
Final exams. It came just about 1 year after students erected an encampment on campus during alumni weekend. Now, the school administration is issuing sanctions to some of the students involved.
Sources tell CBS News New York that up to 70 people have been disciplined for both demonstrations, with sanctions that include expulsions, degree revocations, and suspensions of up to 3 years.
The school's president saying we need a reset to de-escalate the rancor. But today, fresh arrests and tensions boiling over on the first night of Passover.
So the American people woke up this morning and asked the obvious question: why is the government shut down right now? The answer is pure partisan politics being played by the Democrat Party. The Democrats shut down the government because President Trump and the Republicans will not force American taxpayers to pay for free health care for illegal aliens.
And before I get into my substantive remarks, I just heard something that Trump said. Here's what he said. We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible and bad for them, and irreversible like cutting vast numbers of people out. Well, there it is. Trump admitted himself that he is using Americans as political pawns. He is admitting that he is doing the firing of people if, God forbid, it happens. He's using Americans as pawns, as I said. Democrats do not want a shutdown. We stand ready to work with Republicans to find a bipartisan compromise, and the ball's in their court. When he says he will do things, he is taking ownership. He is taking ownership. It's just like in his first term when he said I think we can agree on is we shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute. And you want to shut it down. You keep talking about it.
The last time, Chuck, you shut it down.
No.
And then you opened it up very
times.
quickly. And
20 times.
I don't want to do what you did.
Senators shut down the government for 3 days after refusing to back a funding bill without support for the so-called Dreamers. The two sides are now negotiating a deal that could give those immigrants a pathway to citizenship.
20 times you have called for, I will shut down the government if I don't get my will. None of us have said.
You want to know something?
You've said
it. Okay, you want to put that on my...
You said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And I am proud, and I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut it down.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And he said he will own the shutdown. It's just a point I wanted to make. Okay, now, we're 10 hours away from government funding expiring simply because the Republicans are not serious about keeping it open. Finally, after months of asking, and mounting pressure, Leader Jeffries and I went to the White House yesterday to meet with the president and Republican leaders to find a way forward. And sitting in the room, it was very clear, behind closed doors.
As you know, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration, health care for everybody that comes into the country, and that's what they're insisting.
That the president hasn't fully grasped the magnitude of the disaster he's causing Americans. Americans are prepared to spend 114% more on their health insurance. That's right, that just came out. According to the Kaiser Families Foundation's analysis today, without ACA premium tax credits, premiums will double, more than double on average. And this not only affects those on ACA, it affects just about every American family with health insurance.
Because that would affect everybody. And so we're doing well as a country, so the last thing we want to do is shut it down.
They don't have as much money. They raise the costs on everybody else. So virtually no American with health insurance is immune from these disastrous Trump cuts.
Ask for a driver's license and a Social Security card. This is an anti-fraud amendment. Over where we go, people say, well, why can't you stop illegal immigrants or others from coming here? And the number one answer we give our constituents is when they come here, they can get jobs, get benefits against the law because of fraud. And here, the gentleman from Florida has put together the most effective anti-fraud measure we can find without it changing the actions of the government one bit. And we find all this opposition. Ladies and gentlemen of this chamber, what I worry about is that this bill, which started out with good intentions, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, is going to end up being the same kind of thing that the public gets angry with us on. We say we're doing something, and we do nothing.
They're up against the brutal fact that Americans are to pay, take this one up, 114% more for marketplace enrollees who currently receive financial assistance. That's the Kaiser Foundation. It's devastating to them. And let me be clear, because they like to tell lies because they can't argue the merits.
Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, thank you for joining us this morning. The Democratic proposal is designed to prevent millions of Americans from losing their health insurance, losing Medicaid coverage, or paying higher health care premiums. Why are you against that?
That's an absurd statement, what you said there. Let's be clear about what happened last night, George. No, George, let me tell you what happened last night. Everybody can go and review the facts for themselves. 44 Senate Democrats voted to reject a clean, nonpartisan, continuing funding resolution to keep the United States government open. The Democrats said instead that they wanted to give health care to illegal aliens instead of keeping critical services provided for the American citizens. That's what happened, plain and simple. Every Democrat in the House, except one, voted against the clean continuing resolution. It was nonpartisan in nature. There are no policy riders on it that Republicans favored. It's exactly what Chuck Schumer and other Democrats voted for in March. But they've changed their tune. They changed their tune because Chuck Schumer is having political problems right now. That's just a simple fact, and everybody knows it. He's trying to outrun the far left portion of his base, so he's decided to inflict pain on the American people.
Here are facts. Here are the facts. The proposal does not provide health care for illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants cannot buy health care under the Affordable Care Act. They cannot receive health care subsidies. No. Illegal immigrants are ineligible for Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Program. The Democratic bill does not make them eligible.
It does, actually, because what it does is it unwinds the changes that Republicans put into the big, beautiful bill, the big signature legislation that we passed and signed into law on July 4th. That has been very successful in shoring up Medicaid for the people who are actually eligible to receive it. What we did in the bill, and the CBO just verified this 3 weeks ago, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan arbiters of everything up here, they said that those provisions have helped to reduce premiums. Why? Because we got ineligible recipients off of Medicaid, illegal aliens, and able-bodied young men who are riding the wagon who are not eligible to be there. Medicaid is intended for specific populations of U.S. citizens. That is young, pregnant women who are down on their luck, the disabled and the elderly. Those resources are being drained from those folks, and so we fixed that. We reduced fraud, waste, and abuse in the program. Chuck Schumer's counterproposal on the CR would reverse that. That is a simple fact.
The CBO did not say that about illegal immigrants. You've made your point.
So they make up things. They said they're saying undocumented people cannot and will not receive premium tax credits. They say that undocumented people are going to get these credits. That is absolutely false. That is one of the big lies they tell so they don't have to discuss the issues. The federal government, by law that we passed, does not fund health insurance for undocumented immigrants in Medicaid, period. Nor the ACA, nor Medicare. Undocumented immigrants do not get federal health insurance. They're lying. I hope you'll call them on it when they bring it up. Some of the newspapers have. Okay? I said this directly to Speaker Johnson in the Oval Office. I told him what he was saying was bull, because he said, you guys want that. And he just smirked. Well, there it is. Trump admitted himself that he is using Americans as political pawns. Didn't even answer. And why are they lying? They know how unpopular their position is on health care, but they shouldn't talk about it.